Hi, good morning or good afternoon, as the time may be. This is one of the series of lectures that I did on census for Osher USF a while back in person. But since I'm going to do the other lecture on animal census, I thought I will record this and share it with those of you who are interested. Okay, so we talked about census intro in general, then the important part, the most important sense for human beings, which is eyesight. I recorded that. And subsequent ones include hearing, touch, smell, and taste, and some other ones, which I'll mention as we get along. Okay, so this is one of the oldest and urgent sense, which is the sense of touch, where we feel the hot, cold, pain, pressure, the classical ones. At the same time, the other ones for which we have numerous words such as lick, pat, fondle, knead, prickly, bruise, tingling, brush, scratch, bang, nudge, vibrate, and erotic, of course. And erotic can be very personal, such as a tender kiss, versus even though it touches the more sensitive parts, it can be totally professional, such as the pelvic exam. Okay, now remember how touch is extremely important. Okay, as to we all remember the classic study of a case of the boy in Bubble Boy, the one who had severe combined immune deficiency and was kept isolated, could not even feel the touch of his mom, and then finally got sick enough of being confined and ventured outside and not surprisingly got some infection and died at a very young age. So we are somewhat hardwired from our evolutionary history to likes and dislikes. Obviously a cuddly teddy bear, can comfort you even as an adult, versus maggots, which would be an innate uh, aversion that we all have. Okay, and this is one of the primary interface with an environment. And obviously, with the days of electronic communications, we're all being more and more isolated. So we are maybe losing the touch. And that is apparent by how the senior citizens for whom this lecture is being recorded, uh, at least 60 or more than 60% prefer in person rather than on Zoom. Okay, so that's where we stand. So it's like we cannot run away from our evolutionary past. Okay, and these are, in the classic story, there are a variety of metaphors for touch. Starting with, you know, noli me tangere, the Latin expression that means don't meddle. Okay, touche in fencing, the toccare in music, and obviously the fable of King Midas's touch, where everything turns into gold. Okay, and the classic example of Christ and Mary Magdalene as depicted in this painting. Okay, this is a picture by Titian. Okay, and that was one of the classics of the Renaissance era. Oh, okay, and the touch is right from birth onwards. It's uh, affiliated with essential for normal growth. Okay, for example, when premature babies were kept in total isolation, okay, that the research protocols have discovered that just hiring volunteers, obviously under proper sterile conditions, to give them massage. Okay, they may not necessarily be blood related. That helps the premature babies gain weight at a faster rate than those who are kept under total incubator. Okay, and they are more alert and respond more. The incubators, while they're life preserving, they're rather bright, light, and noisy. Okay, and the babies who were massage by volunteer grandmas gained 40% more weight and were able to be discharged earlier. And even this is not just for human babies, but it extends even to other mammals. Okay, even just a simple touch with brush, it goes useful. And so, is there a universal grammar for touch? Hugs and pat, that are dramatically important. And in some African cultures, a mother would chew the food for baby and feed him. Okay, now that may be a bit too much for Western hygienic society. And that is the first bond that we establish with our moms, okay, which is the touch. The mother's touch is divine and has physiological, psychological bonding and emotional effect that cannot be overstated. Okay, and the touch is always in the news, as you can see from this picture. Okay, and that was that obviously his wishing, the clergyman wishes that he could touch this woman, but obviously that's a big no-no. Okay, and there are some inappropriate touching places in workplace, which you know and a lot of politicians and CEOs have been guilty. And the touching culture are primarily the so-called Latin and the Middle Eastern cultures. Okay, and giving a hug or handshakes or giving kiss, even amongst in men, is a fairly common norm in the Middle Eastern culture. Touching the feet of a important person or a guru is has been in a norm for a long time. And obviously there are counter effects of that we have seen. That was the untouchables. And perhaps with the caste structure, as much as we like to criticize it, perhaps it may have had some bearings in hygiene, because the so-called untouchables worked with were involved in the dirty jobs, and then it became like a profession, and led to social isolation and denigration. And Gandhi uh, spent a whole lifetime trying to eliminate the uh, rampant discrimination that was and is prevalent in the Indian society. Okay, and a lot of literatures have been written by the Brits and other more open-minded Indians about the evils of the caste structure. And again, even in a business, handshake to seal the deal. Okay, and on the other hand, with the advent of hygiene, some of the non-touching cultures evolved. Okay, and of which the prime examples are the two island nations, UK and Japan. So, and now there are some oddities that you see around the world as you travel around. So, for example, in Finland, a nude sauna is uh, tolerated, but not kissing. Okay, and sometimes some unintentional touching in restaurant or library, have some happy outcomes. Some interpret researchers that did a study that with a simple accidental touching by waiter or waitresses has been known to be associated with bigger tips. Okay, so this is so it's an interesting observation of societies in general. Now, if you have emotional disorders such as Asperger's syndrome, okay, those victims are very averse to touch, and this was very obvious in the popular US comedy show Big Bang Theory, that the lead character who clearly has Asperger type or even autistic type behavior, was averse to touching. Okay, so enough general commentary on touch and society. Now, I think we'll talk at length about the animal kingdom, but I think for those of you who don't have the time or are not attending the second part of animal senses, I will
This strange
video
creature
on
has an ability that's
the
so
star
unique
nose moth.
that it could help save thousands of lives every year. This is the 50 Strangest Animals series, picked by you guys.
Okay, I think I'm maybe connected with my headphones, so let me disconnect that.
Hey everyone, this is Michael Simon from San Diego, California, and I have found this crazy looking animal. Check this out.
Thanks, Michael. Even without the pink, fleshy star on the tip of its nose, the star-nosed mole is still a weird-looking creature. It's long, dark brown, covered in water-repellent fur, and has big, scaly feet for fast digging. Another strange fact about this bizarre animal is that in the winter, its tail swells up with actual fat, making it 4 times larger than its normal size. You'll find this mammal hanging out in the wet lowland areas of Canada and the northeastern part of the United States, but it prefers to stay underground, as it's pretty much blind. But don't feel bad, as this little guy has the best sense of touch of any mammal in the world. The pink star shape on its nose is made up of 22 fleshy tentacles.
Ew!
That each has about 25,000 touch receptors, and it's called Emer's organs. The mole hunts its prey under the water. It inhales and blows out really fast air bubbles, which allows it to track small fish, worms, and other tiny aquatic animals. The tentacles move with lightning speed and can touch as many as 12 objects per second, and they're believed to detect electrical fields as animals move through the water. This allows the mole to quickly identify what's for dinner, and whatever it is, it doesn't stand a chance. So what exactly is so special about this mole? Research has shown that their nose is designed in such a way that it's perfect for detecting earthquakes. Scientists are currently studying just how fast and accurate this mole's ability is so that it can help with the structural design for building more advanced machines.
Okay, so that was interesting, obviously, and I'll talk more about the weird sensations that is widely prevalent in animal kingdom. And now the touch has strong physiological basis. It secretes the well-known but less understood chemicals in the body called endorphins. And again, the bonding that takes place with the onset of pregnancy, even before childbirth, releases a hormone called oxytocin, and that's the feel-good hormone, so to speak, and similar to dopamine to some extent. And at the same time, the endorphins release cortisol and reduces stress. Okay, so this is apparent not just between the bonding is not just prevalent between women and babies, but even men who are in monogamous relationship, when they become father, their body and the hormone levels, the testosterone levels drop. They start getting a little bit of oxytocin surge and become more mellowed. Okay, so this is, was taboo in, some of the early Puritan society type thing. So, and so there's a real scientific basis for this hormone, and a physiological reason. Okay, and this is again, there is a social hierarchy associated with this, that hand on, just on top of the other hand, sort of a double-handed elbow grasp and hand on the shoulder again. So that has been again known physiologically to reduce the biomarkers such as calming down the heart rate and blood pressure. And as I mentioned a little while ago, this is an evolutionary basis. Okay, as this, I had a nice video clip from BBC about evolutionary basis of touch, but due to copyright laws, I cannot share it, But these are the two still images from that is like we have evolved toward ape cousins, chimpanzees, who spend hours grooming each other, bonding, and amongst two males and females, mother and infant. So that's like, and that goes a long way in establishing the true hierarchy and system. So, and the troop leader obviously, has a lot more power in the group behavior. But when somebody who wants to appeal to his good senses, would offer grooming. Okay, at the same time, the massage, without the sexual innuendos, has a big role and helps just reduce the tension to, and people would spend top dollar for arranging for massage, and was very prominent in the Ottoman culture, and is now, can find a really effective massage parlors in many urban areas. Okay, and at the same time, before the review committees, there were some of the studies that were done by psychologists. The one that comes to mind was, I think he was at University of Wisconsin, Harry Harlow, and for this experiment, he presented infant baby monkeys with a cloth mother versus wired mother. Okay, the wired mother had bottles with food, the cloth mother had no food. Okay, in the other situation, the cloth mother had the bottle and the wired mother had nothing. So this was, and in spite of the obvious benefit of getting food and nourishment, the infant monkeys preferred the cloth, which appeared like a mom type of thing instead of the wire. So the physical touch had a lot more, they were willing to trade their nutrition for this simple benefit of touch. Okay, so then later on, he extended his experiment to keeping this infant monkeys in isolation chambers for as long as 2 years. And needless to say, they developed serious emotional and intensely disturbed factor. So, and this perhaps when this research became apparent, that was a factor in the rise of the animal liberation movement all across the country, that perhaps animals had equal rights and should be treated as humanely as possible. And so this was, and they became very neurotically asocial. So that was some of the horrid experiments based on our current sensibilities. Okay, and not to be outlined, that the history of communist Romania is well known to some of you at least, that due to Romanian orphanages were overcrowded, and the children were left, were given just basic food, but did not have any human context, and were left alone until they became almost, but not just toddlers, but older, and it became apparent that afterwards, a lot of these children, after the opening of the communist regimes, were adopted in the West, and turned out that they experienced severe emotional and physical deprivation, led to problems even in the adulthood, even after being adapted to Western society. So mother's touch had huge effect on their growth, emotional and psychological development, as well as their immune system. Okay, so this was, now there are some first-person interviews again, but due to copyrights, I'm not going to share the videos with you, but I'm sure you can easily find it. And so this was well documented, as a human tragedy. Okay, so it's all basically in the touch, that we already talked about, the varieties of types of touch, and the nerve receptors, which we'll talk about later on, that that you feel when you stub your toe, feel the pressure, then the pain comes along later on. So different fibers conduct the messages to your brain in a different way, and this way some of the spicy peppers again get a numbing and tingling effect, and sometimes and the dental drill, obviously nobody actually looks forward to it, and that's one of the reason, even after being infiltrated with topical anesthesia, you still feel the pain and pressure through the vein. So some of the nerve conduction is still different, Okay, so and that's just to give some more details about the Szechuan peppercorn. That's not truly a pepper, but it's just slightly different, similar to capsaicin receptors. And again, there are varieties of receptors, the mechanoreceptor, with the hot coffee. Okay, so these are, some of them are processed in our spine and with various relays it's sent up to your brain. Okay. Okay, so now this again, the touch is, human touch has a very creative ability, So like, for example, this is from the ancient times, potter's touch has a huge impact as to how our sophisticated, just with hand motion alone and touch, people can create intricate containers and art objects, just starting from the earliest human endeavors. You can just see the clay potters and the Greek jars, and then so that has a long history of touch and creative process that goes along. Okay, not to be outdone, in the early days, the royal touch is well documented in the history. That people had scrofula, that is the cutaneous tuberculosis, and the French and the English kings, where the royal touch was supposed to be miraculous in curing. Okay, and obviously it did not work, and the practice continued for almost a couple of hundred years before the advent of scientific era. A most miraculous work in this good king, which often since my year remain in England, I have seen him do how he solicits heaven himself best knows, but strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery he cures, hanging a golden staff about their necks, but on holy prayers, and it is spoken to the succeeding royalty, he leaves the healing benediction. Come describe the Edward the Confessor's in touch in Shakespeare's Macbeth. So this, was, we may laugh at it now, but obviously that had, people had a lot of faith in. And then there were some horrid practices that were done. This was one of the, again, classic painting, flaying of Marsyas by Titian, again, from Ovid's book 6. Okay, it shows killing by skinning alive a satyr who rashly challenged the god Apollo in a musical contest. These are the varieties of mythological subjects, which were carried out, for the King Philip II of Spain. So this was, okay, so this is one of those things you can just see. I mean, it makes us cringe nowadays, but that was the start of punishment that was done, Okay, and this was another thing of touch, and okay, that Diana, was bathing with some of the angel friends, and was accidentally human as Actaeon stumbled upon her, and her touch turned her into a deer. So these are varieties of paintings that were depicted based on the stories from Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is one of the classic paintings, which is at the National Gallery. Okay, and then again, obviously from the biblical, this incredulity of Saint Thomas by Caravaggio. Okay, so as they touch as to see, then saith he to Thomas, reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands. Reach hither thy hand, and thrust into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord and my God. Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed me. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. Okay, so again, this is the doubting Thomas, depicted. And obviously, not to be outdone in the sculpture, touch and kiss has the classic sculpture, The Kiss by Rodin, okay, 1882, okay, loving sculpture by hand. And I already mentioned earlier about the kissing, feeding.
Origins of the human kiss. In a world without prepared baby food and electric mixers, mothers fed their children chewed food. It's known as kiss feeding.
Kiss feeding occurs in all cultures, so far as we know, and it was originally found in Europe. Mothers at a certain stage of the development of the baby feed their babies, in addition to the milk, with pre-masticated food from mouth to mouth. And this behavior pattern got ritualized in a variety of ways to kissing.
Okay, so we talked about that earlier. Okay, and this is the famous painting by Gustav Klimt, 1907, The Kiss, and we already talked about Rodin. Okay, and we already talked about the smell of kiss, sharing food, touching, and sex, and that's and masturbation again. Even though it is a relief, and I think I did a class on history and science of sex where I dealt with it at great length. Okay, and it was considered a big taboo and a no-no in the Christian civilization because of the importance of the male semen, and to defile with hand. That was the origin of the word, by the way. Okay, and okay, so
intriguing origin.
Okay, now as to this was an interesting observation as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Okay, so these are the varieties of the front taboo on the top part, and okay, the taboo zone. So it's like a partner. Okay, what consider everything is acceptable. Friend, what is not acceptable. Brother. So this is, the blue outshine black areas are highlight taboo zones where a person with that relationship is not allowed to touch. Blue and red signify male and female subjects. So we can analyze that women are more at ease being touched than men. Men are more comfortable being touched by women than by another man. Okay, but then again, that's this culture that in different Asian cultures, for example, it is not uncommon for a man to hold hands walking with his friend or put a hand on his shoulder while walking about. No, that would be considered, outrageous and would hint towards a homosexual or gay relationship in the Western cultures. Okay, and the men, although they are tolerant or not, they're considered kosher or acceptable, comfortable if a stranger touches you. On the other hand, women would really, be threatened and not acceptable. Okay, and they would consider that as invading their privacy. Women are allowed to touch more areas of the body than men. Okay, so this is okay, and this was a study done in Finland and UK. Okay, but more than 1,000 people. So this is that between friends, families, acquaintances. So this was what is okay and what is not okay. So that's the data from it. Okay, and then again, skin is important. That's the largest organ of the body. If this was like a human body exhibit that went around the world, which was really, this is the amount of skin. And some of these were Chinese objects that were, now whether they were actual cadavers or prisoners whose bodies were dissected and demonstrated, that there was always that doubt about it. So skin weighs about 6 to 10 pounds. It's large, about 2 square yards. Okay, and it serves varieties of purpose. That is our window to the outside world, provides insulation, protection. It's the biggest way of protecting ourselves, Jim. It has, sexual connotation, the colors, and obviously the effect of ultraviolet rays. When we did the class on science of rays, I'll have some slides to say about it. But again, skin is extremely versatile, waterproof, washable, elastic. Okay, and again, there are varieties of layers. Okay, and the most sensitive parts are your fingertips and tongue. Okay, and again, your genitals are and the perianal area are sensitive. Okay, so this is, I mean, the skin figures widely in human condition and contact with the outside world. So it's like a first layer. And this was one of the first, this thing with the, and wars are good for scientific advances. And during the First World War, when the gas was used and people had burns, that is when the first time, the British Lebanese scientist expert, started with skin grafting, and that was the start of the whole plastic surgery. Okay, and that's to got into the whole field of immunology. Dates back to that time, as to between self and non-self. And again, the burns have been the most difficult rotation that we recall, the smell of burning flesh and skin. And obviously, the percentage, and more than 40%, can be really fatal because you lose a lot of liquids, through your skin after burns, and then, and at the same time you're leaving yourself wide open for infections. And recently there have been some experiments have been done with cadaver skin grafts, and along with covered with membrane, and even people with 90% burns have, after a long care and hospitalization, have been able to. And interestingly, when you get this type of grafts, you do not get the sweating and the hair follicles, but at least, people were able to survive. And so, and now skin has varieties of layers, which will, I may get to it, if I'm not sure whether I have the slide for that. But the outside layer, basically, that's one of the things that, it sheds very easily. The skin shells are sloughed off, and is the second layer of not the epidermis, but the dermis is the one that has the feeling. And it has been, now I don't know how true it is, but nobody goes around cracking safe, because cybercrime is a lot more rewarding. But in the older times, the safe crackers used to use sandpaper on their fingers, okay, and to increase the sensitivity. And fingers are remarkably sensitive, that even just less than 0.1 millimeter difference, the fingers can tell the difference. And for example, people who are doing carpentry can just rub their finger and see whether the finish is successful or not. Okay. And this was, some of the collections from Wellcome Collections, okay. And derma, the word originally comes from hide, which was, again, we go back to our hunter-gatherers days, that for, this skin of animals provided with clothing and protection from the elements. Okay, and okay, let's see what else I have. Yeah, okay, and it's all we already talked about, the skin grafting, okay, and now, and skin grafting was has a long history in the ancient Ayurvedic tradition. The skin grafting, especially because of disfiguring of nose that was considered as a punishment, skin grafting was practiced, and they were reasonably successful. And now we have come a long way, with matching the HLA antigens and selecting the appropriateness of grafting. Okay, and full thickness and partial thickness skin grafts are used for burn victims. And now, with the advance of science, it can be even 3D printed skin grafts, with blood vessels are being experimented upon and used. Okay, so there are varieties of cells in the skin, and these are just some of them. Melanocytes, which has a huge and long-standing history, that they originally, as humans migrated out of Africa, everybody was dark skinned, and with the transit to the colder climates of Northern Europe, it by default, and with the importance of ultraviolet rays, vitamin D, the people started losing their skin pigment with the origin of whiteness, and there are varieties of shades that one can develop. And at the same time, there are other type of cells called keratinocytes. Keratin is one of the most common proteins, and there are other cells which are called Langerhans cells. I don't know if it's the same that has to do with the pancreas and insulin, but I'll have to look into it. But that has to do with immunity, and there are varieties of sensory nerve endings, that we'll get to as we move along. Okay, and then there are varieties of lines in skin, in the graph. They're called Langer's line again, and then okay. So this is, not an anatomy lesson, so I won't get into it, in too many details. But this is just a cartoon diagram of the hair, which we have, some people may have more or less. And these are the pores in the skin. And the sweating is the one that is the evolutionary benefit. That's one of the reasons why the hunter-gatherers were able to outrun an impala. And given enough time for a longer race, a human being can outrun a horse even, because other animals don't have the sweating facilities. And there are varieties of touch organs which are labeled by some of the Italian European discoverers, which are called Meissner's corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. Okay, and at the end, more or less, they all do functioning, that they provide a direct message with the nerve endings linking to the spinal cord, and to the second relay, the impulse gets into your brain, basically. Okay, so epidermis does not have any blood vessels, by the way. Okay, and so these are varieties of structures that we talked about, like, and the palms and soles do not have any, they are basically hairless. Okay, the hair color is again related to your melanin pigment, and there are the sebaceous oily gland that makes you sweaty and smelly. And genetically, a lot of Asians have far less sebaceous glands, so they don't sweat that much, and they don't have the smell that we are all buying. And deodorant is a big business, $1 billion business in the United States and in other Western societies. Okay, and obviously even the identical twins can have different fingerprints. That may surprise you, type thing. So okay, so so all the stimulus is being detected, transmitted, and perceived in your brain. So that's the essential function. Okay. So these are the varieties of strata. These are the cells, the keratinocytes. They are the continuous strata, which is sloughed off. And then the stratum granulum. These are the keratinocytes. Okay, and then the dermis is at the bottom which is inundated with the nerve endings at the bottom. And so again, then there are varieties of other proteins, which is primarily one being elastin, which is a long-lasting protein. And it can be stretched, and as you get older, you're losing your elasticity, and that accounts for the big wrinkles that we all suffer with. And there's a big business now with injection of Botox therapy. Okay, and the stratus corneum basically restricts the water loss, and again gives us a protection. So okay, so again, I had referred to in the earlier class, that as Desmond Morris back in the 70s wrote a book called The Naked Ape. And so when we lost our hair, and that's the evolutionary end to end of the sweating ability. Okay. And this is some of the examples of the so-called Langer lines. Let me see if I can illustrate, sorry, but this is kind of, once you start to make it bigger, it loses the accuracy. Okay, and these are the varieties of lines, that have been anatomically determined as to how they are transmitted over across the male and female body, and that is important for plastic surgeons as to how they make their incision for grafting. And so for day-to-day purposes, it doesn't have a whole lot of rules. So, and this is the literature goes back a long ways. Okay, so I can't read as to when the book was published. I think it was probably in the 19th century. This is obviously a reprint. So okay. And again, just to elaborate, these are the functions: defense against pathogens, insulation, waterproofing, temperature regulations, and sensation, sweat, and sebum. Okay, so this is, and another important function is synthesis of vitamin D. That's extremely important, okay, because it has to do with your, your function of your internal organs as well as your bone strength. Okay, so now I think this is an example of the vitamin D.
In the past, we had shown that we can take simple types of cells and put them together, print them together, and that would create a tissue that looks something like human skin. But right now, there are grafts that are used in the clinic that are available commercially. But one of the challenges is that when you put on the graft, it eventually sloughs off, which means it falls off. Most of the grafts that are available, they don't have a vasculature, which is the blood vessels. And the blood vessels are important because they're the ones that feed the graft from the host. They bring the nutrients, they also help remove the metabolites. And so if you don't have this sort of communication channels, if you may, between the host and the graft's not going to survive. But now we are combining these with more types of cells, with melanocytes, with endothelial cells, with pericytes. And what we see is that we have this really nice functional vasculature that forms in the lab when we print the tissue. But then when we graft them on animal models, we see that the graft integrates nicely with the animal skin, with the animal tissue. But what was really exciting for us was to see that we have connections between the mouse blood vessels, in this case the host, with the blood vessels that we had printed in the graft. And that's exactly what we want, because that's what's going to make the graft integrate. We've always appreciated as tissue engineers, as engineers working to recreate biology, the fact that biology is far more complex than the simple systems we make in the lab. But these new platforms, new technologies like 3D printing, 3D bioprinting, what they're allowing us to do is really start doing that organization, that engineering, that architecture building, if you may, at the length scale of proteins, at the length scale of cells, positioning the cells exactly where they would appear in the natural context. We also have our eyes on, how do we take this work further, make that skin.
Okay, so you got the idea. So it's the technology is, moving at a rapid pace. Okay, and this is the classic book that we talked about by Desmond Morris, which was somewhat risque with the clear-cut description of some of the sex between humans and also describe the animal behavior at great length. And this is, as you can see, over the millions of years, our skin pigment change, and we lost the hair as we go around, and that was the appropriate for his title. And this is before the era of genetics, okay, and genome study. And so these are the big changes in the epidermis genomes. Hairy skin is poor for evaporation, okay, and again, so this is, so that's why the baboons cannot run very well. They get hot very quickly, and that's where the sweat glands, finally evolved as a defense mechanism and give us the ability to work and travel in long distances. And that explains how people can run in these so-called ultra marathons for 24 hours even, and run hundreds of miles. Okay, and so this is. Okay, and then again with this, we lost the ability of this raising the hair as an animal when it gets upset. The hair raising that you see, so we don't have that type of reflex. But at the same time, we developed our social architecture because with the loss of hair, the facial expression became a lot more way to work in groups and explain your pleasure, happiness, anger, dismay, all of the emotions that we can explain, like their face is the mirror of your brain, so to speak. And again, then obviously this led to the naked skin being decorated in varieties of ways. All the cultures from the ancient times onward had skin tattoos. And this goes back to Ozzy, the Iceman, whose body was discovered several years ago, and he was, it was like a 4,500-year-old skeleton, and his skin and their organs were very well preserved. And interestingly, he had all the usual diseases of agricultural society, because he had some seeds in his pocket. Obviously, his clothing was based on animal skins, and but interestingly, he had skin decorations with varieties of vegetable dyes. Okay, and so this is, and we lose the skin follicles, type as with time goes by. So especially, that requires, as to how you can see in your bath, that the hair are falling out from the follicles. So you're losing, it's being recycled as, on a daily basis. Okay, and so sweaty skin was the primary interface with the environment. So, okay, and then again, and so this is, one of the reasons we talked about as to how we have the advantage over our animal friends, and again, the sweat can be, considered like with a negative connotation with this body odor. Okay, and there was a rise of the perfume industry, which I talked about at length in the class on smell and taste. Okay, and there are different types of glands, the eccrine glands, which are all over your body, and the apocrine glands, okay, which are not significant and are associated in your armpits and your genitals, okay, and the scalp. So, and some of the animals do have those apocrine glands, especially camels, So this is, we already talked about, the varieties of protein. They are the bone morph proteins were in the skin glands. Okay. And now this is the biggest cause for the conflict in human society, as around like ultraviolet rays are helpful as well as harmful. There are three types of ultraviolet rays with different wavelength, the A, B, and C, as you can see at the top, and then the infrared spectrum at the other end of the spectrum of light. Okay, the UVB can cause skin damage and cancer, but it also helps with vitamin D. Okay, and UVA is causes the quick sun tanning effect. The UVC is absorbed by ozone layer. Okay, because of the wavelength. Okay, and the skin pigmentation is like an evolutionary compromise, has evolved many times depending upon the migrations. Okay, now is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, with the Ice Age and the migration out of Africa, further humans got away from the equator. They lost the skin pigmentation. But at the same time, when they went to extreme north, near the Arctic circles, they were able to get vitamin D from their diet, which was rich in fish. Okay, so their skin tone is somewhat darker than the people at the lower latitude. Okay, and obviously, and the difference, the more close you are to the equator, there's a different dark pigmentation. But at the same time, the Kalahari, desert people did not have that darker skin. So you can see all sorts of a spectrum that you can see. And I think I've talked at length, for those of you who have taken the class on science of race. Okay. And so, and this is, again, this has to do with the melanocortin gene and a protein, so this is, the eumelanin, and absorbs the UVA, and that makes you dark brown. It neutralizes the so-called free radicals. That this particular protein, again, that's all the proteins are coded by the genes, that is on the surface of the melanocytes, okay, and then again, UVA can cause skin cancer, okay, and now at the same time, the ultraviolet ray B is folate sensitive to ultraviolet B, so that helps you form this essential vitamin. And with the deficiency of folate, obviously that leads to some serious birth defects. So that may have been a trade-off as to how people developed skin changes, because they wanted to absorb the essential ultraviolet rays to create vitamin, and improve the survival, because obviously the survival of fetus is extremely important. So there was a compromise that they losing the skin pigment or getting skin cancer at a later age was a fair trade-off, okay, as long as it was helpful for reproduction and survival of the species, okay. And so this is it was important, you know, for synthesis of vitamin D as well. So and we already talked about it, the extreme north, you know, because of fish in the diet, you know. So there was this is an evolutionary trade-off that occurred nicely between ultraviolet rays. On one hand, it can cause damage and skin cancer. On the other hand, it is essential for folate metabolism, and the absence of which, you know, you can get birth defects. So, and again, loss to species, you know. So this is an interesting, you know, and the scientist named Nina Jablonski did an extremely good analysis, and she has several YouTube discussion and videos which are very erudite and detailed for those of you who are interested in learning more about it. Okay, and again, you know, it's obvious, you know, that the UV rays are highest at the equator and in the dry areas, and again in the near the mountains, so Tibetan areas, you know, the UV rays can be very destructive. Okay, and so we already had talked all about it, type of thing. So, and we talked about the neural tube. Okay, and you know, so and obviously, you know, if you don't have enough vitamin D, you know, then you're at a higher risk for a skin infection and his overall. So that's, you know, I already discussed briefly the trade-off that takes place, you know. Okay, and again, you know, this is, you know, the classic example of Lady Godiva. She, okay, about the effect of hair. The flowing hair was considered very attractive and romantic, and these are some of the paintings by Paul Rubens. The long hair was a sign of virility. Okay, and and those of you who have read the romance novel, the Fabio, you know, was the muscular guy with long flowing hair. Okay, and again at the same time, you know, a lot of the you know, the mustache and long beard were considered a sign of virility and male. Okay, and okay, so we already talked about that hair has a big role in attractiveness. So these are some of the paintings. Okay, hair and culture. Okay, and this is, you know, Asian and Native Americans have less hair, and you know, then again, this has a lot to do with, you know, the culture of the African Americans have curly hair, different types of hair. And again, this was, you know, you can just see the Caucasian person with straight hair. And during the apartheid South Africa, you know, the so-called pencil test was used to determine your ethnicity between white and black, you know. And again, you know, so this is considered a sign of sacrifice, you know. And there was a woman named Rachel Dolezal, who tried to, she was Northern European ancestry, and she tried to pass off as a black person, you know, and was outed. Okay, and again, you know, the sacrifice of hair, you know, in Jainism, the women who became monks, you know, they go around to rather extremely painful procedure of plucking hair. Okay, and the women, you know, they go around bald throughout their career of their, you know, penance or what have been becoming monks. Okay, so it's a small sect which is primarily in India. Which arose around the same time was actually preceded Buddhism, but Buddhism was exported and became largely accepted in China, Asia, Japan, etc., while Jainism remained confined to the South Asian subcontinent. Okay, and again, you know, the hair transplant is a big business type of thing. So, and then varieties of chemicals are used to color your hair, and it's a big business, you know. And exporting hair from the varieties of temple in India, it's again a big export item. Okay, that goes into forming artificial hair or wigs, so to speak. And wigs were a big part of the of the Victorian era and even before that. Okay, and again, so this is how, you know, the transmission of once the stimulus is detected, it's transmitted, perceived, and then becomes conscious. Okay, and then it causes no processing occurs within the white matter and just simply transmitted at gray areas of the brain that are processed. The information is on the way. So this is how the information goes through the brain. I'll have a better diagram, I think, later on. Okay. Now these are the varieties of skin corpuscles, and the Pacinian corpuscle, they look like an egg lying on a side. Okay. And then again, there are other corpuscles which are able to sense vibration and pressure. These are varieties of anatomies that then eventually the stimulus is converted and becomes an action potential, converted into an electrical signal and transmitted to the brain. Okay. Pressure, vibration, sensation. Okay, you can just feel it. It's like when you're holding anything, or a tuning fork for that matter. Okay, and then light touch, this is transmitted by something called the Meissner corpuscles. Okay, and this is basically Herrschaft. They are right in the lower layer. Okay, light touch and vibration. Okay, and there are other receptors which are called Merkel cells. So the varieties of receptors, and again, this gives you a nice example of the skin organ. Basically, the touch, pain, light, the light touch, okay, and heat, obviously, and wind, okay. And at the same time, there are receptors called nociceptors that just sense pain, okay. So it's an exquisite evolutionary mechanism. So this is, again, unless you are going to be a dermatologist or apply for or write for MCAT, and this is not that critical. So the names are academic at this point, but they can detect vibration range of 10 to 50 hertz. Okay, and some of them are more sensitive than the others. So, okay. Now there are some diseases which are autosomal recessive, and there people lose the sensation of touch. Okay, and fortunately, unless you're marrying your cousin, these are rare. But are more prevalent in certain populations which have inbreeding, and they're more prevalent in limited, smaller groups such as Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, and this is the sensory area of the brain. Like I think we talked about it when we talked about the homunculus, as to how the more sensitive parts of the brain occupy a large area of your sensory cortex. Okay, for example, your lips and your fingers and hand, again, there. So the odd-looking creature, you can see the large, thick lips, hands, have a huge representation compared to the rest of the body. So this is, the maps are not rigid, and they can change depending upon whether you have your eyesight or not, or if you have amputation, obviously the other parts would expand and become more sensitive. And all of these were elicited during brain surgery done by the well-known Canadian neurosurgeon, because brain does not feel pain. So when they would stimulate the part of the brain, a patient were able to tell as to what part of the body was, they felt the sensation. So that is how he meticulously documented the motor and the sensory areas of the human cortex. Okay, and this was a work done in the 30s. Okay, and this concepts goes back to the early days of European scientific discovery of Paracelsus. Okay, so these are the sensory maps that can be modified. And again, the classic example is that of Helen Keller, as to how the touch took, in the same way, in blind people, So then we talked about the free nerve endings, which are the nociceptors, or the pain receptors, the free nerve endings that can feel the temperature in a mechanical stimulus very easily. Okay, and this is kind of a defense mechanism of withdrawal response, very quickly, to protect yourself very quickly. So that response occurs within a few seconds. Okay, because the body's main function is that of survival, and this is lost in leprosy. Okay, and some people who have the so-called have a rare mutation, they can deform their skin. Okay, and some people have increased pain sensitivity, so it can work both ways, loss of sensation, at the same time, extremely sensitive. At the same time, the body learns how to block self and non-self. Because even if you wear the sweater, you don't feel itchy all the time. Your body learns to ignore. Okay, and I think I talked about it in the sense of the touch type things that, and obviously that's one of the reasons why you cannot tickle yourself. I think I might have a slide for that afterward. Okay. And except for smell, which is a direct pathway to your brain, a lot of the other sensations, such as your sight, your hearing, and your touch, that is relayed in your thalamus, which is like the gateway to your cortex. So thalamus, when the sensory organs send the information down to the thalamus, which is a relatively small organ, and then it is finally transmitted up to the primary sensory cortex and to other areas where you learn to interpret it. So from the receptors, okay, and we already talked about the autism. Okay, at the same time, there are some common diseases where you lose your senses, such as your vitamin B12 deficiency of the genetic type as well as the nutritional type, where you lose the sensation. And similarly, diabetics get neuropathy is very common, and you see the ads on late evening television about the diabetic neuropathy of the nerve pain, and the rare disease called the Charcot-Marie Tooth disease, where there's a genetic abnormality. Fortunately, the gene is rare, and that they not only have loss of sensation, but at the same time they have a problem with balance and can get some severe disabilities in multiple organs. Okay, so these are varieties of diseases that we can talk about. And we already talked about the sweat glands. These are the classic difference between the eccrine and the apocrine glands as to their diameter. And again, unless you're a really science nerd, they're not that interesting type of thing. So again, this is, and now still flabbergasted with the increasing popularity of tattooing. This is, again, the word is of Samoan origin. We already talked about Otzi. Okay, and okay, and then there is, and there are varieties of dyes are used. Some of them can be toxic, and obviously you can catch some infection if the needles are not clean. And again, the importance of sweat has to be emphasized. You can lose as much as 500 cc or half a liter of sweat per day. And then if you're running, obviously you can lose up to 1500 cc, or like I don't know how to convert it into, but 15, so it's 1.5 liters per hour. So sweating you can lose a lot of volume. That's one of the reasons for replacing the fluid when you're doing a long distance running. Okay, and this is in perception. Hopefully this won't be.
Not to have the water too hot. Now, stick your hand in the room temperature water. The water feels cold, even though it is the same temperature as the air. This is because water conducts heat more efficiently than air. After a while, the water does not feel cold anymore. The hand is then put in the cold water. The cold water feels very cold and is making my hand cramp a little. When the hand is placed back into the room temperature water, the water now feels warm. When the hand is placed from the room temperature water into the hot water, it feels like the hand is burning. The hand is placed back into the room temperature water and the water feels cool again. On your own, what happens when one hand is placed in the hot water and the other in the cold water? Then, both hands are moved to the room temperature water. Feel free to use the comment section to post your results or make your own.
Okay, and the reason is because the brain is looking for change. Okay, instead of the absolute, it's looking for change to the some receptor. So the preceding experience hyperpolarizes the receptors and cause the brain to interpret the stimulus as being stronger than it actually is. So It's like how his brain is in big inference organs, as the theories of consciousness would say. So it's trying to make sense out of the world, as with the huge number of stimuli that we are being bombarded from.
Not to have the
Okay, and nociceptors, the response to harmful stimuli with spinal cord pain is in experience, basically. So this is, capsaicin, okay, the functional hallmark, basically this is the chili receptors, type of thing. So, and this is Hungarian paprika, okay, so this is noci means harm. So this was discovered by the great neuroscientist who went on to the Nobel Prize and kind of one of the grandfather of neuroscience, Dr. Sherrington. So this is transmitted around the spinal cord and sensation of pain. And there are now, in the recent past, varieties of channels for transmission of pain have been discovered, which I'll talk about a little later. Okay, it's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. Okay, and there is a potential for tissue damage. Okay, now at the same time, there's some individuals are born with abnormality, genetic abnormality, and they do not feel pain. Now that is nothing to be excited about, because that pain is the big defensive mechanism. And there is a whole Pakistani family that had this channel gene abnormality of SCN9A channel. And this initially, this was a poor area, so the kids were making money from jumping from walls and broken bones. Okay, and so this was but that can be very fatal, that you can end up with a life-threatening injury, not realizing that you're hurting yourself. So there are 50 different shades of pain, type of thing that takes place. Okay, and so. And I have some links about the pain channel later on. They put in the chat. Okay, and this again, you can see that the parts of pain, the heat, acid, needles, so you can transmit it by different channels that have been isolated. And again, basically, so these are exquisitely tuned to the receptors, to the stimuli, and then it's transmitted to the spinal cord and is sent upward with the relay mechanism. Okay. So tissue injury, so these are, the names are not that important, basically. So again, there, and we already talked about the Pakistani family type of thing. And again, so this can be a big factors, and some of these can be related to the so-called TENS, the electrical stimulus, the gadget that has been devised, the TENS unit that kind of folds your spinal cord in percepting the brain. And this is, again, there may be a role for acupuncture also, that it interferes with the so-called some of the fibers that are unmyelinated and may change your perception of the pain and have a big role in pain relief. This was a crazy man who actually immersed himself in hot chili Tabasco sauce and tried to make money on YouTube video, and obviously, it was extremely painful and a foolish experiment, to put it mildly. Okay. I don't think I'm going to show that or spend time with this one. So it was just crazy experiment for monetizing it.
A ghost haunting you. You can feel it, but you can't see it.
Derek, I'm going to touch different parts of your body.
This is Dr. V.S. Ramachandran, who did a lot of work on mirror imaging and help relieving the pain that amputation patients feel with the so-called phantom limb. And this was several years ago. He's at UC San Diego. And the mirror neurons have come into some question, but I think there is definitely a role for amputation and the identifying your body parts.
To be there. It's like a ghost haunting you. You can feel it, but you can't see it.
Derek, I'm going to touch different parts of your body and face with this Q-tip. I want you to close your eyes, and each time I touch you, tell me where you experience the sensation and what kind of sensation you experience, okay? Close your eyes.
Felt a touching on the phantom thumb.
The phantom thumb. Close your eyes again.
Just the phantom thumb.
Just the thumb, okay.
Just on my forehead.
Just on your forehead.
Just on my nose.
I'm going to move the Q-tip along your jaw, and again, tell me what you experience. Keep your eyes shut.
Felt it through the phantom hand.
Okay.
Run across the knuckles of the palm.
So you felt the sensation running across the knuckles of the phantom palm. Okay. Now, what has happened in this patient is he has lost the arm. Therefore, if you go to the map, there is no information arriving in the region of the map corresponding to the hand, because there is no sensory input from the hand. Therefore, the neural signals going from the face to the face region of the map, which happens to be right next to the hand region, invade the territory that originally received signals from the hand. Therefore, when I touch the patient's face, the messages go to not only to the face area, as they should, but they're also invading the territory corresponding to the hand. And these messages are then relayed to higher centers in the brain, and the higher centers interpret these signals as arising from the face and from the missing hand. And this is what gives rise to this curious illusion that we call a phantom limb.
It's as if the nerves reaching the sensory cortex from existing parts of the body were spreading into the dead zone, a dramatic demonstration that pathways in the brain can be changed after infancy.
So now what I'm going to do is to dip the Q-tip in some hot water and put the hot water on different parts of your body and different parts of your face. And don't be startled, it's not hot, it's just warm, okay? But tell me what you experience.
Okay.
Close your eyes.
Just a second. Okay, so but you get the idea.
Of course, everybody knows I do, but to know, doctor, is that
done any real research on mapping the brain as far as phantom pain is concerned and what to do to alleviate it.
As a result of Ramachandran's work, they know that their symptoms are neither psychosomatic nor a cry of protest from severed nerve endings. But some of their physicians still don't seem to understand.
I just wanted to know, doctor, is that we know what we're going through. How do we educate our doctors? How do we get them to listen and not tell, like B, that we need a psychiatrist? That's been said to me too, but of course everybody knows I do, but...
Okay, so anyway, but this is like the fake limb, that can help, with the phantom limb pain. So, but I think this is a long video and I won't take too much time on it. So those of you who are interested, I think I have a link placed in somewhere and a reference also to this. So the brain maps are, it's a very different.
Chemistry can do some wild tricks with food, letting you taste in a new way, literally in some cases. Here's a party trick to demo your chemistry prowess, depending on the party. So here's what you do. Before the party gets rockin', in a different room from the demo area, take a clove of raw garlic and slice it in half. Put this in a garbage bag and tie it up to contain the smell. We'll explain that later. Now, in a different room that doesn't smell like garlic, take off your shoes and socks. Still with me? Stick your foot in the bag and rub the garlic on the bottom of your foot. Give it about an hour. 1 hour later. And you should start to taste garlic.
I'm definitely getting like waves of garlic flavor now. It's not super strong, but it's definitely there. How are you feeling, Darcy?
Yeah, there's sort of a weird metallic-y flavor, and I occasionally am like smelling it much stronger than the room background smells now.
Yeah, the odor of garlic is just stinking the room at this point.
Yeah, but it came out of nowhere.
It's not because you have secret garlic taste buds on your feet. It's because the molecules responsible for garlic smell can penetrate your skin, get into your blood, and travel to your mouth and nose, where you suddenly start to sense the taste of garlic. Chief among these molecules is allicin. See that oxygen with a double bond to sulfur? That looks a lot like the key feature in this molecule, dimethyl sulfoxide. DMSO is notoriously good at penetrating our skin. It can even carry other chemicals along with it. Chemists are extra careful when working with DMSO, wearing gloves and other protective equipment. You know how oil and water don't mix? Our skin has layers that repel both oil and water, which is one reason it's such a good barrier. DMSO and allicin have a little bit of both kinds of chemical properties, and oxygen for hydrogen bonding with watery stuff, and hydrocarbon tails for oily stuff. They act a little like oil, a little like water, so that garlic flavor slips right through the skin, into your blood, pops up in your nose and mouth, and voila! Oh, and we use those garbage bags so it's not the smell of garlic in the room that's tricking your senses. You're actually tasting Allison that went through your foot. Give this food chemistry trick a spin and let us know in the comments how chemistry.
So this was, and we again talked about already. I'm sorry about repeating this. Alcohol can do that too. So, and spinal cord injury, heavy metal poisoning, organophosphate can have a lot to do with it also.
Oh, are you nervous at all?
No, a little.
All right.
After a few moments to psych herself up, carries the first onto the foot fryer. Cue the dramatic music.
It's totally not hot.
Despite her levels of adrenaline shooting off the scale, Carrie makes it across safely and finds her feet unfried.
It's doable. That's doable.
Next up for their tiptoe into trepidation is Grant.
Yeah, Grant!
And cool as a cucumber, he catwalks over the coals.
There we go. A little hotter than I expected, but I think I made it.
Which just leaves Tori. And true to form, he steps up and charges straight in.
Here we go.
Before breezing across.
It's not that bad at all. I thought it was gonna be a lot worse than that. It looks way worse than it is. It's really not that bad. It's the mental part that messes with you the most. As soon as I stepped on it, it really wasn't that bad. In fact, I didn't even feel it. I had to walk back one more time just to see whether or not they were hot. That was so crazy. But you know what? The worst part was what was going on in your head. The physical wasn't so bad.
Yeah, there is not any amount of drumming or chanting that would have made me walk on that coal. But the physics was there. That's what got me through the first step.
You know what? I'm not gonna lie. It was hot out there, but not hot enough to burn us.
All right, so this one's looking busted.
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 All right, let's try gasoline-soaked socks next.
Woo!
It seems it's physics that keep your feet from being flame-grilled and not mind over matter. Or is it? What about a mind unprepared? A mind unsullied by the certainty of science?
I thought it was gonna be a lot worse than that.
To find out, let's segue to the next day.
What are you cooking? We're gonna be cooking, well, at the bottom of your feet.
We're looking at the science of firewalking.
Firewalking! Awesome!
Apparently, Adam would walk over hot coals to walk over hot coals.
We're all set up. Adam just got here, but we haven't lit the fire yet. I want to light it in front of him so he sees how hot the...
Okay, so this, wood is a poor conductor, step lightly. So this was one of those things. I think there was some guy, who used to be one of those self-help gurus on TV. I forget his name, but he used to have this as his last thing about mental preparation. But, that can be tricky also. So this is another clip that is, the haptic touch. This is electronic skin. This is somewhat futuristic.
Why do we really have a sense of touch and skin? To protect us, right? And how do we protect ourselves? If it's hot, there is a sense of pain.
Okay, so that is something that is coming down the pipeline. Artificial skin, we already talked about, this Stanford, this is a similar thing from Stanford. Okay, the touch sensor that can detect small forces in flexible electronic neuron, and then are improved versions of the previously described sensation. They are the components that stimulate a synaptic transistor, okay, which is modeled after human synapses. I'm sorry, I think this is a video that's missing. I think somewhere along the line it did get loaded correctly. This is something called Ember wave. Okay.
We've all been there. You're hot, she's cold. Temperature wars happen in the office, at home, in the car, anywhere. There are even studies about it. But then we heard about this new device called Ember. It's a personal thermostat that you wear on your wrist. Here's how it works. It's quite simple. You put the Ember on your wrist and turn it on. Then push the left side for cold or right side for hot. Both hot and cold have multiple settings. Ember's co-founder described it to me as a mini air conditioner or heater on your wrist, and that's exactly what it felt like. The heat and cold comes in waves and lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, but can also be turned on for almost 30. They also explained that Ember is changing your skin temperature and not your core body temperature. Think of it the same way you would hold a hot cup of tea when you're cold. The sensation of the heat in your hands makes you feel warmer, but your core body temperature isn't actually changing. But what the hot and cold sensation is actually doing is waking up thermoreceptors in the skin on your wrist and affecting your nervous system. A recent study at UC Berkeley found that Ember wave actually restores comfort by up to 5 degrees. And by the way, the Ember was designed to be used in everyday environments where your core temperature isn't affected, so it's not meant to replace a jacket or to be worn while skiing. Here's what I like about it. It actually works. Anytime I got uncomfortable in the office, I simply pushed a button and got warmer or cooler and way more comfortable. It's very easy to use. You simply push a button and decide whether you need to be warmer or cooler, and it immediately fires up. Also, the battery lasted for several days. I went about 3 or 4 days before I needed to recharge the Ember. But what I didn't like about the Ember was that it was really bulky on my wrist. I couldn't actually type or use my mouse because the Ember was getting in the way. Another thing I don't like is the cost. At $300, the Ember is very expensive. Lastly, if you have sensitive skin, the Ember might not be for you. While it didn't affect my skin at all, a coworker who tried the device actually had her skin turn a little bit red when she turned the heat all the way up. So should you buy it?
To do all kinds of amazing things, tool you, spare you those details. Matt Hertenstein asked, can you communicate compassion and a lot of emotions we're soon to talk about with touch? And indeed, so what we did is we built a barrier in our lab, and the person stuck their arm through, and they waited, and this other person was given a list of emotions. They had to touch the person with a 1-second touch to the forearm, and that person on the other side is like, what the heck was that, right? And they make a guess, and what you find, quite remarkably, those are accuracy rates in the blue bars, right? In this study, chance guessing was 8%, right? And what you're seeing, compassion, they're getting it right about 55, 60% of the time. Pretty amazing sympathy in this case. And I am ethically obliged to tell you 2 gender differences in this study. We had all gender combinations, women touching men and women, and vice versa. When the woman tried to communicate anger to the man, he got 0 right. He had no idea what she was doing. I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. And when the man tried to communicate compassion to the woman, she didn't know what was going on. So good luck. Ethologists who lived in different parts of the world quickly recognized that in a lot of our cultures, people spend most of their time in direct physical contact with one another. You know, estimates are that
The non-human primates spend about 20% of their waking days grooming each other, 10 to 20%. You go to various other cultures and they're spending a lot of time in direct physical contact. And regrettably, we are a touch-deprived culture in the West. And this has been documented. One of my favorite examples is a researcher who studied the conversations of friends in different parts of the world. They're sitting in a cafe, and in England, the two friends, holding constant the unit of time, touched each other 0 times. In the United States, in bursts of enthusiasm, we touch each other twice. And in Puerto Rico, the same friends touched each other 180 times. We know, as an opportunity for intervention, just think about these thought experiments. Babies that were placed in orphanages that had all, this is 70, 80 years ago, that had all the nutrients and warmth and physical security, died at rates of 75% until they told the caretakers, hold the baby. They stopped dying, right? Unbelievable mechanism of social well-being is touch. It may be the greatest. Michelangelo said, to touch is to give life. And he was right. He was absolutely right. So what we know in this realm of touch, and I'll talk to you about some cultivations or interventions that flow out of this, is that when you touch somebody, Edmund Rolls, the neuroscientist, has found you activate the orbitofrontal cortex, that site of reward and compassion and the like. We know that touch builds up cooperative relationships, or what evolutionists call, it reinforces reciprocity. And there are studies of primates. You see those two guys grooming each other. If that one on the left finds some food accidentally, guess who it shares that food with? The one on the right. They use grooming to build up cooperative alliances. There are basic studies showing that touch signals safety and trust. And needless to say, there's a whole new science of touch soothing. And what we know, now you can put your facts together, basic warm touch calms cardiovascular stress. It activates the vagus nerve. James Gross at Stanford has found. One study has found it leads to oxytocin release. It makes people more cooperative. In the prisoner's dilemma game, if the experimenter walks by and goes, it's good to have you in the experiment, and he pats that person on the back, or she pats the person on the back, that person is twice as likely to cooperate just by feeling a pat on the back. It is profoundly important. So what about touch therapies? These are real. This isn't some weird Berkeley idea that we spin out in a hot tub. I don't even own a hot tub, but and Tiffany Field has changed medical practice by promoting the science of touch. And this should be encouraged in classrooms and therapeutic settings alike. Some of the highlights in the over 80 studies of touch therapies rigorously conducted by Tiffany Field and colleagues.
Okay, so you get a general idea type of thing. This is from a website called The Greater Good from, as he said, it was from UC Berkeley. Okay, but I think that's basically, we've gone over this point, so, okay.
Lighting a match, and then the subject's fingers will be anesthetized with a local anesthetic, similar to what you'd experience at the dentist, applied to the thumb and forefinger, and so this will remove touch sensation from the fingers, and that will take just a moment with the assistance of the doctor. And so now the subject is going to try to perform the same acts. Picking up a matchstick becomes quite challenging, okay, no, not quite successful. And on a further try, okay, one can sort of grasp it, and will we get it lit? Closer. Yes, okay, finally. So, exactly. Well done. Really challenging to do. So I think we've all experienced similar conditions if you've fallen asleep on an arm or something like that. Lighting a match, that will take just a moment with the assessor. And so acts. Picking up a match, quite challenge, not quite 60. Okay, grasp it and
we went through this.
closer. Yes, okay, finally. Exactly. We've all experienced similar conditions. If you've fallen asleep on an knocked, letting them.
So, okay, and haptics, this is a word that is relatively, a lot of people may not be familiar, but it's a Greek word, being able to connect. So this is called science of haptic, which has to do with the artificial limbs and applying the sensation with the device of sophisticated computer applications, so coordination of touch, perception, and action. So this is, has a role in virtual reality applications and robotic in the case. So this is, basically VR. Okay, how actuator and touch-based devices, you can vibration. This is from a respectable study. Lightweight electronics. So this is basically how you can feel sensation. So haptic touch demonstration. So this may be winding down now.
This box sends ultrasonic vibrations into the air so that you feel objects as if they were hanging in thin air. Now what we're going to do is try and guess some shapes here, okay? Now this is actually going to create a noise, so we can't talk whilst you're trying to guess that shape, okay? Right, so what we're going to do is put the picture on the screen so everybody else can see it, and then I want you to guess if the object is either a cone or a square. Okay, so they are your two choices. Okay, are we ready? Right, so let's just...
Is it a cone?
Say that again.
A cone.
We think it's a cone. So can we see? Yeah, and that's what everybody else can see. It's a cone. Excellent. Well done. Well done. So what we have are 256 tiny speakers, and they're creating ultrasonic vibrations. So they're outside of the human range of hearing. So we can't hear them, but Ethan can feel them. And it's like that feeling, when you're near a very loud bass speaker, so you can feel it in your chest. So it's like that, but much, much more precise.
So you can see that the Beach Boys were right, picking up new vibrations. I'm feeling excitation. So I think they were onto something. Okay, and this was again, the simpler touch interactions are complex. I think I did. Sorry, but I got a little bit carried away. Type of things.
Facet of mechanical interactions with the skin is that even very simple touch interactions can be exceedingly complex. So here I'm showing the finger pad. These are the fingerprints, the raised ridges on the pads of your fingers, and the little dots you see around here are sweat pores that help to maintain moisture in contact between your finger and a surface. The finger pad here is in contact with a glass plate, right? So we're able to image the finger, and as it begins to slide, we see, well, there's initially adhesion throughout the whole area. Then as the finger starts to move, we get this inward collapse until the whole area is sliding. So within this area, we have on the order of 1,000, a couple thousand sensory endings that are all translating each of these small movements into signals sent to the brain. So from this very elementary interaction, my finger sliding against a glass plate, we get a wealth of neural information. And so it's a real challenge to understand how touch perception, really familiar acts of touch perception, arise from given the mechanical complex facet.
This was again, and obviously, the science of fingerprint was very popular in the 19th century. And if you've read your Sherlock Holmes, you know about it. And the Scotland Yard and the FBI maintain a huge databases. And again, it's making resurgence with your personal ID, as to how you can have your computer password with your fingerprint ID and your phone. Okay, and this is sometimes sensory deprivation is. I think a long time ago there was a movie, starring William Hurt and Blair Brown about how totally immersing in a tank, with sensory deprivation. And these are still now commercial. And this was like he reverts back. It was somewhat of a scary movie, not quite a horror film, but he regresses to the primitive man basically and goes back to the evolution track. But it was kind of a nice way of explaining how sensation and evolution are interconnected. Okay, and then there was some romantic angle, as it usually is. And now this is available in our Predator Sense, so you can this is a news item from Orlando.
About to have my first floating experience. It's 60 minutes of pure relaxation. Come on in and I'll show you how it works.
Inside is a practice unlike many others.
It's a unique experience. There's nothing like a float tank. This is the Genesis Float Pod.
This futuristic looking pod takes away all your senses, helping you have a fully clear mind.
There's about 1,000 pounds of Epsom salts in the tank, so that allows for the body to completely relax. It's totally buoyant. There's no effort to floating.
The first thing you want to do is take a shower to get rid of any oils or lotions on the body. Floating naked is recommended, but for the purposes of this video, I'll keep my bathing suit on.
You have people who are interested in the possibility of psychedelic effects in the float tank, and you have people who are just interested in the physical, possibly medical benefits of floating.
I'm ready to get in.
Okay, it's time to float. Wish me luck. What happens in the float tank is very similar to what would happen in a deep state of meditation. So when you're in a deep state of meditation, your brain waves slow down. So you enter into what's called a theta state. Sometimes you can get little micro dreams when you're inside the float tank or when you're in deep meditation, which is really cool.
The lights stay on for the first few minutes until you find a comfortable position. Then it's lights out.
Okay, I think that was the whole purpose of it, and different people react differently type of thing to it. Okay, so I don't think
About to have my
Okay, and then there is obviously the last but not the least, one of the most interesting but rare aspect of sensation called synesthesia. Okay, where this was people have their sensory areas of brain overlapped, between like seeing numbers in colors and being a savant. Okay, this is sin means join, and aesthesia means perception. So any of the five can be joined. Color, letters, and the numbers are most common. This is not a new phenomenon. It's known for about 300 years. Okay, and some of these, it's like rare. No, it's 1 out of 25,000. Some of them can be savant, and Rain Man comes to mind. Okay, but these people can be deficient in other areas. There was a knowing savant on whom the main movie was based, the kid out of Utah, but he couldn't look after himself. There is a functioning savant who's an Englishman, okay, and he's been well studied, and by Ramachandran, who we met earlier, okay, and this can be X chromosome dependent. They may have other illnesses such as, epilepsy. It's more common in artists, painters, poets, and some of the well-known synesthetics are Itzhak Perlman, Van Gogh, Stevie Wonder, Rimsky-Korsakov, Nabokov, even Marilyn Monroe, Richard Feynman, okay. And there's an English savant, who's read with a boy, who dreams in on Tuesdays it's blue color, so to speak. So famous savants. Okay, I think this may be his example.
I kept a list of words according to their shape and texture. Words round as a 3, gobble, cupboard, cabbage. Pointy as a 4, jacket, wife, quick. Shimmering as a 5, kingdom, shoemaker, surrounded. Numbers felt like my first language in a way that English never did. English felt to me like a foreign language. And so being able to recite these numbers like a poem composed in numbers, or a story composed in numbers, was for me a way of expressing myself, communicating with other people, and realizing for the first time that I had a gift for communication. which is paradoxical because I'm also on the autistic spectrum. I was born with what we call high functioning autism today, and often people on that spectrum, even on the highest end, find language difficult. It was my case growing up, but it's something that I've learned to master.
He may have started with numbers, but Daniel Tammet also has an intense relationship with words. He speaks several languages, and his new book is part travelogue, part meditation on the subject of how we communicate in all its variety.
Ljósmóðir is an Icelandic word. It's one of my favourite words. It means midwife, but it literally means light mother. And this is, of course, the first, 10, 12 digits of pi. My language, the language of numbers, which I used. And
So Daniel Tammet, so he's an autistic savant, and I read his book back in the 90s. He was able to recite pi up to 22,000 digits from memory, and he was able to learn new language, Icelandic, which is a difficult language, in 3 months, and was able to give a TV interview. Okay, I think now we
understood as a child.
Last slide. Okay, phantom cell phone syndrome. Okay, this is maybe the
text, but you pull your phone out and you look at it and it never actually rang. Studies are finding that while most don't find this to be very bothersome, a lot of people are experiencing this. A recent study of undergraduates found that almost 90% are experiencing this hallucination. So the question is, why? Why is this happening to us? Some claim that technologies like the phone are somehow rewiring our brains, but I think that a better way to understand the phone and other technologies is in terms of learned bodily habits. Think about wearing a pair of glasses. If you're accustomed to your glasses and they almost become a part of you, you can forget that you're even wearing them sometimes. The phone in your pocket is like this. Through bodily habit, the phone actually becomes a part of you, and you become trained to perceive the phone's vibrations. It's really easy to misperceive. Around in your pocket, I'm getting a call. Your pant leg rustles, I'm getting a text. You call again.
Okay, so this was our talk. I think this was my last slide, and hopefully you'll find this enjoyable, and as to how we've come a long way from grooming each other to imagining fun and missing things. So, and okay, so I'll stop my screen share, and I think there is only last one that is listed is about hearing, and then I will share this with those of you who have signed up for the new class on animal senses, which is altogether different work. Thank you, folks, for listening. Goodbye.